This is Mr. Martin. These are video notes for Geometry Honors. We're still on section 12.1. This is the fifth video, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to solve for a missing angle in a right triangle. So far we've learned how to solve for missing sides. We've learned how to find the trig ratios of a triangle, the sine, cosine, and tangent, and now we're going to look at finding a missing angle. So first let's take a look at a trig equation here. We've got sine of 40 degrees is equal to x over 18. And we want to label the different parts of this. So the x over here, this would be the opposite side in our triangle. And the 18, SOHCAHTOA, that would be our hypotenuse in our triangle. And then of course that 40 degrees over there, that would be the angle in the triangle. So what's the difference between this equation that we just labeled and this one over here, cosine theta equals 5 over 13? So if you think you might have an answer, go ahead and pause the video and write that down, and then you can compare it with my answer. So the main difference between these two, in this first one we're solving for one of the sides of a triangle. Over here, this theta represents the angle in a triangle. So let's draw a picture to go along with this. So I'm going to make this acute angle theta. Theta is a variable that we'll use all the time for angles, so make sure you know that. And this is my adjacent side, this is my opposite side, this is my hypotenuse. And since the cosine of theta is 5 over 13, and this is cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, I know that this adjacent side has to be 5, and my hypotenuse here has to be 13. Okay, so now we know these two sides, but we don't know the angle in there. Alright, so the difference here is we need to solve for the angle. Okay, whereas before we had to solve for the side. So let's take a look back here. We need to have a small conversation about inverse operations and how we use them to solve equations. So inverse operations, okay, this is in a non-technical sense, undo each other. We use them to isolate or solve for a missing quantity. Okay, so solving for x, finding the side of a triangle, which we just looked at in the previous video. So in order to be able to solve this equation over here, we're going to need to know inverse operations for the trig functions. Okay, so our normal trig function of cosine, the inverse operation, we call it cosine inverse. Okay, normally for addition, its inverse operation is subtraction. For multiplication, the inverse operation is division. For squaring something, the inverse operation is to take the square root. But for cosine, the inverse operation is cosine inverse, or sometimes you'll see it as arc cosine. Okay, two different notations. Most of the time we'll use the first one, cosine inverse, but I want to let you know about that other notation in case you see it, you know what's going on. And then for sine, the inverse operation is sine inverse. Again, you may at times see it as arc sine. And then for tangent, the inverse operation is tan inverse or arctan. Okay, again, most of the time we'll work at it with these. Okay, so these undo each other, just like addition and subtraction. If I have minus 5 in an equation and I want to undo it, I just do plus 5 on both sides. Alright, so again, the key to using inverse is to do it to both sides of an equation. If you don't do it to both sides, then your equation isn't balanced anymore. So in the first example, I'm going to show you how to use the inverse on both sides. And then for the second example, I'm just going to have you find, we'll just do the work a little bit differently to save some time and space. So here we're trying to find the value of angle A, and I need to undo the cosine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cosine inverse of both sides. So I take the cosine inverse on the left, so now my cosine inverse and my cosine are going to cancel each other out. But since I took the cosine inverse on the left, I'm going to have to take the cosine inverse on the right. Okay, so these are going to cancel, and we're left with angle A over here. Now, to enter cosine inverse on your calculator, it's just above the cosine button. So you have to hit second, and then cosine, and then you just type in 0.7071. And if you go ahead and try this, hopefully you get 45 degrees. And if you don't get 45 degrees, make sure that you check your mode and make sure you're in degree mode, because we want our answer in degrees. And if you need help with that, make sure you ask me in class. All right, let's do part B together, and then you could do part C on your own. So I have sine of A equals 0.55. So if I want to solve for A, and again, I'm just going to do a little shortcut here. I know A has to be the sine inverse of 0.55. So instead of taking the sine inverse of both sides, I just kind of went to a one step because I know the sine inverse is going to cancel on the left. And then if you go ahead and plug that into your calculator, you should get 33.4 degrees. So go ahead and try part C. You can check with me in class to make sure that you got the right answer. And that's the end of this video. We're going to go on to one more video and look at a few more examples and bring this section to an end. And we'll see you next time.